All right, this is an American Flyer O-gauge locomotive. This goes in our City of Denver Streamliner under work right now. So when we got this, it was untested. Put it on the rails, it didn't really run right. It went reverse but not forward. You can see from the bushings aren't round anymore. The bushings have been worn to an oval shape. So when we had our wheel set in there, the wheels would move up and down and slip on the gear. So here's our gear stud. Bushings are going to have to come out. The pendulum unit is just really sticky. It needs oiled and cleaned up and lubricated. On the top of the motor, this is our motor mount for the Streamliner. It wiggles like crazy. So this rivet has loosened up in here. It's supposed to have some play, but I don't think quite that much. And it's filthy. There's old grease everywhere on this thing. So priority one is to open it up, try to get the bushings replaced. They should be round like this. This is a smaller American Flyer O-gauge. The bushings are a little bit different. I've got to try to track this style down. If I can't find that style, I might just use some pre-war Lionels and use a slightly larger axle. But we will see. All right, a little bit more on the motor. So the motor is apart now. All I did was clean it. All the old grease is off. It's in really, really nice shape. Still got to work on the bushings. But a couple things. So this is your brush holder. The brush holder, the brushes were, the grease, there was so much old grease on here that the brush holders, I had to push the brushes out. So once the brushes came out, and they are worn down to nubs. Once I got the brushes out, these tubes have to be clean. So it's just a pipe cleaner with some paint thinner. Gets all the old grease out, get them nice and clean. We'll put some new brushes in. Our issue was the armature. So we're going to try out armature swap. This is an armature that I had laying around, and you can see the commuter plate is in pretty good shape. This one is the one that was in there, and on the commuter plate there's a groove, like a U-shaped groove worn on that. Now on the Lionels, I'll pull a commuter plate off and take one off a different locomotive. On this one, there's a brass center that's like press fit on the shaft. So these are actually identical. So before I put this locomotive, like work on the bushings, I'm going to put it back together and just try with the new armature and see if it'll spin. And then if that runs, then I'll start working on the reversing unit, getting that freed up, and then try to press fit some bushings in. All right, so this is our motor plates separated. This is my trick. I have a pair of pliers. I put this side in my vise and then tighten it down as tight as I possibly can. This side I pull on, and then these two metal tips go between the plates, and when I pull on the handle, I can usually break a frame apart. All it is these little studs that stick up are ball peened together. So the plates came apart. I have one set of bushings out already. Same thing. The bushings have a thin side and a wide side. Wide side goes down between a vise, and then I just take a little punch and just tap on these, and usually the bushings come right back out. To put new bushings in, it's the opposite. Wide side goes down on the vise, the top of the vise, push it up through, and then I just use a punch and just tap around until I tighten this around the hole. Occasionally I'll have to go back through and take a little rat file, rasp file, round file to go through if I kind of flatten the hole off at all. But it's usually very, very simple because these are bronze or brass um, just to kind of get things back together. But everything's all cleaned up. Everything looks pretty good. Um, this goes to the pendulum, the one that comes down. This goes to our contact on the track. Everything's disassembled. The one thing I did find, so this is part of the pendulum, and on the pendulum, it's copper contacts. There's a fiber board on the back. This is got a shoulder bolt through it, and when I took this off, this had a lot of play in it. So same thing. I just tapped this with a punch, okay, because it's a shoulder bolt. I can't over tighten it, and it still spins really, really smooth, but it's lost that up and down play that it had. So that's back together. This is my motor mount. Same thing. I got rid of the play that was in the motor mount. It still spins. There's a little bit of side wiggle, but underneath, I actually drilled a little bit more out. It was a very, very tall brass rivet. Drilled a tiny little bit out just so that I would have material, and rounded that back down so that my motor mount is nice and tight again. So everything looks like it's ready to start reassembling as soon as I pop these last two bushings. And I think what I'm going to do is, this old motor frame, American Flyer, is not good. I think I'm just going to pop that frame apart and take the bushings out of there, because the bushings out of this are original American Flyer, and they are really nice. There's hardly any wear at all. And when I take my axles and run my axles through, there's no play. They're nice and tight. So I think that's going to be my plan, rather than buy new ones. See if I can't make that work. All right, so this is the American Flyer O-Gauge City of Denver Streamliner motor restored. So just a quick overview of what happened. So when I got this, it didn't run forward. The reverse unit wasn't functioning correctly. Contacts were okay. Everything was loose. And most importantly, the wheels were loose. So it used to be that you would wiggle these wheels and it would slide up and down, because the bushings and bearings inside had worn themselves to oval shapes instead of round. So this is it all finished. Everything came off. So the motor mount is held on by 4 screws. When it came off, it still has some wiggle in it. But the head of this shoulder rivet went on a vise, and then I ball peen hammered the bottom. That got that tighter. In the back, the reverse unit that slides, it's a little crown-shaped copper plate. That was loose. So the head of the rivet back here, once this cage was off, the head of the rivet went on a vise, and then on the inside of its mount, that got ball peened. The wheels came off. I put a flathead screwdriver behind here, and then underneath behind here on the gear side, so there's extra metal, and then twist the screwdrivers opposite direction. The wheels came off fine. They didn't break or crack. Once those were off, I put my pliers in a vise and pulled the plates apart. It's held together with 3 posts. There's 1, 2, and then another one up here. Got the plates apart, got the bushings out. When I got the bushings out, they're not the typical American Flyer O-Gauge. I bought a set of those, and they were too small. The axles are about 3/16 of an inch. The hole in the plate is 3/8 of an inch. And the replacement bushings I got were only a 1/4 inch. So I use these. I put this into a lathe, ground this down on the inside in the middle until it was 3/8. Took a hacksawed off the bottom part. This became my outer wide flange. That went through. I drilled a 3/16 hole, and then once it was through, I used a ball peen hammer to pound them down. Once I did that, then I had to re-drill the 3/16. But when it was done, I got nice bushings and the wheels don't slide hardly at all. And it only cost me 4 of these little acorn nuts that I got at my hardware store. Um, the armature inside the motor is new. The one I had worn grooves where the brushes are on the copper commutator plate. So I had a spare American Flyer armature that I put in there. The reverse unit got adjusted. I did oil this back here because it kept sticking. Tightened up my spring tension. There's a spring on the front that it connects to. And what you get with freshly painted wheels, beautiful in forward, beautiful in reverse. The lights slide up. New wire installed here. This is our original wire from the motor field, coil field, all the way back. It was in good shape, so we kept it going. But it rolls so nice, and it's very, very clean. No rust. And everything works like it should. So the next part is putting it back in the Streamliner.